Hello there, and welcome to week 2 of the course. This week is going to be the first week that we actually start looking at material that's in your workbook, and I'm going to have you do some actual assignments. So what I'd like to do with these videos is just kind of talk about what I want the take-home message from this week to be, give you some hints, things to look out for. So this week, what we're going to do is we're going to start talking about what is called human inference. And human inference is basically when you're presented information, what do you take away from that information? And what you're going to see today is sometimes when we're presented with information, the inference that we make is not correct. And that can be due to the way the information is presented. Maybe there was something incorrect about the way it was presented, or maybe the information that was given was correct, but the manner in which it was presented causes incorrect inference. The other thing to keep in mind is inference is not an easy thing. We think, if I'm presented some information, it should be pretty straightforward for me to figure out what's going on. But that's not always the case. As human beings, we're not always that good at making inference. And so being able to critically look at things and analyze information is a very important skill to have. So I've got some notes here. The first half of what we're going to look at this week is looking at information that's presented in things like news articles or charts, things that you commonly see. So if you went to any news source and pulled up, the front page of the news, stuff like that you would see in the take-home message we take away from it. One of the very first things you're going to look at are sensationalized headlines. Everybody is guilty of this, especially in the day, anymore with social media. A lot of times what happens is people will look at articles, they only read the headline, and then based off that headline, they go ahead and they make inference. And I don't know how many times I've seen someone, look at an article, they only read the headline, and the next thing you know, they're sharing it with everyone else. Oh, hey, look at this article, look what I found. When really we can't do that. Articles, a lot of times their headlines are sensationalized. We make really poor inference from them. We really do need to read the article. And even when we read the article, sometimes we still have to sit down and think about it even further. And so the very first worksheet you're going to look at today, what you're going to find is one, that article has a sensationalized headline. It's going to make a claim that children on playgrounds are doing a lot of cocaine. And what hopefully you're going to take away from that is one, the headline is very sensationalized. And when you go through and you actually read the article, you're going to say, this word flooding is a bit of a stretch here. And they're going to make a certain claim, and you're going to go through and actually check that claim, looking at some data from a table and figure out how they made that claim. And what you're going to find out is technically what they say is okay. They're going to use this word doubling. But when you really go and you look at the percentages, it's really not a fair statement, and it makes what you think from that incorrect. One of the other things we're going to look at today is misplaced decimal points. Now, misplaced decimal points is an example of when the information that was given is actually incorrect and it's due to an error, and that causes your inference to be wrong. And you're going to see lots of examples. Pretty much any time that you see a claim that something happens so many times per minute, and then they automatically jump and say that means it happens this many times per year, or a similar claim, you want to actually go through and check the math and see if that claim is correct. So you'll want to do a conversion from minutes to hours and see if that's the same. One of those examples is going to talk about medication doses. So, this will be very applicable to most of you in your field, and you can see, how big of a problem a misplaced decimal point can actually be. You're also going to look at charts today. News articles, I find, love to use charts that are called pictograms. They're pictures that they'll put inside of charts to show you different things. And what you're going to find out is those are often incorrect. And the reason for that is those charts change with area instead of just height or width. And the videos today are going to talk about all of these ideas some more before you actually work on the worksheets. So now after you get past that first part of the work for this week, where you look at information that's given in like news articles and the inference we make from them. After that, we're going to have you actually look at some data and try to make some inference from some raw data. And there'll be small data sets, but it's things that you've probably seen before, but it's probably been a while. Things like the mean and the median, something that's called variance. These are all ways to describe data sets. And what you're going to find is using one descriptor alone is not enough. It's kind of like if you were to go to an art museum, you look at a painting and somebody said, hey, describe this painting to me, and you only got to pick one color. Well, it wouldn't be a very good description. So the same thing happens with data. We need lots of different ways to describe the data to actually figure out what's going on. So you're going to look at some of those different descriptors. The other thing you're going to do this week, and it's probably one of the most important things you do this week, is you're going to make histograms. Now, probably everybody in here has had made a bar chart or a histogram at some point, in your academic career, but it's probably been a while. Really take some time today on those histogram videos, and the reason for that is I'm going to make you make some simple histograms this week, but several weeks from now, later on in the course, you're going to have to make some more histograms. So it's going to be very important that you understand not only how to make them, but when you look at them, what they're telling you. I don't know how many times a student will say, well, I put this data set into Excel and it popped out a histogram for me. The important thing is, can you look at that histogram and see what it's telling you, not could you make it in Excel. So don't get too hung up on what tool you use to make the histogram. I don't care if you draw it by hand, if you find some online tool, you can use any of those. The important thing is being able to actually look at the histogram and understand what information is contained in that plot. And I've got several videos that talk about histograms today to kind of give you a review and show you what I mean and what I'm talking about there. So as always, and I'll say this at the end of every video, if after you look at today's work you're really confused, please use that discussion board. Make sure you ask questions. Let me know where you're confused. If you need to, send me an email. Please do not use the message center in Canvas. It causes problems. It sends me multiple emails and it's kind of a pain. So if you do need to contact me, feel free to, but just make sure that you're emailing me from your normal email account. So like I said, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you, and I will be around.